Okay.
All right, we are recording. Don't all talk at once now.
Can we have the Asana page up so we can move along? Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to the Heartwork Guild meeting of September the 26th, Thursday. Currently coming at you from the Sunshine Coast and Pender Island. And as usual, we would like to start with an acknowledgement of the lands on which we are working and living. So, Ben, could I ask you to give us a land acknowledgement?
Of course. We start by acknowledging the land as a reminder to ourselves to keep things in perspective, as a reminder that we are only here alive on this planet because of the land and the interconnected relationships of all living things that support us and allow us to be here. And so in acknowledging the land, it is a reminder to us to be in right relations with all of our relations, from the smallest microorganisms up to the biggest whale and everything in between. And in knowing and being reminded to start with the land, we have a debt of gratitude to Indigenous cultures around the world who have discovered and rediscovered and maintained this wisdom, and who generously share it with us, even though they have been suffering at the hands of racism and genocide and colonialism for generations, and still bearing a heavy burden to keep this wisdom alive. And so not only do we acknowledge that gratitude, but we also acknowledge our responsibility to do what we need to do to get back into right relations with all of our relations, including our Indigenous neighbors. And so with that, I specifically acknowledge the Wasanic, who are the traditional holders of this land, stewards of this land for time immemorial, who are still here, who are still my neighbors. And I acknowledge my joyful obligation in learning how to be in right relations with the land and all my relatives. And with that, I will pass it back to you, April.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. So let's do a quick check-in. And then I can lead us in a very short grounding if we'd like to do that. I have a question today, which I've been thinking about, and I thought, why not have all of us give our opinion on this one, which is, what is the rain bringing forth? That can be in any sense. And the circle, as I see it today, is Ben, April, Roland. Beginning with Ben then.
So what the rain is bringing forth in me is a desire to hibernate. And that's not a bad thing. It's sort of the rain and the gray offer a sort of big picture perspective. You know, no point rushing around. Might as well enjoy that second cup of coffee and think deep thoughts. So that's what it's bringing forth for me. Over to you, April.
Well, what it's bringing forth for me is a heightened sense of smell, of what things smell like after the rain and while the rain is happening. And the realization that I don't like it when it's always raining, but that it is actually a bit of a life force, and figuring out how to be with that, I guess. Over to Roland.
The rain is making me want to brush up on my zoology and learn as much Lyme ecology as possible. So over to Ben.
Line ecology, you say?
Yes, the study of slugs.
Ah, there we go. There's the punchline. To which I say ducks.
It was a more creative way of doing a knock knock joke.
Back to you, April.
Let's just do a short grounding to get us from where we are now into what we're doing with this session and what it is that we're going to do together. So I would invite you to just settle yourselves more deeply where you're sitting and feel your feet flat on the floor. And take a deep breath in and hold it and exhale. And again, make sure you're sitting so that you're supported, your shoulders are down, and take a deep breath. Feel it come into your lungs, and then feel it on the exhale. And as you're breathing in your mind's eye, just be aware of your feet flat on the floor, the buildings you're in, how that connects to the land. And let yourself be part of the soil and feel yourself integrating as deeply as you can in the soil and the world that that holds. And just be aware around you of the smell. And if you're feeling anything through your fingers, and be aware of what you hear. And just hold all of that for a moment. Take one last very deep breath and hold it. And exhale. And then count backwards 3, 2, 1, and find yourself back with us here. And Roland, could I ask you to take us through the agreement?
Yep. The agreements are, in a way, self-evident for whenever things have gone well in a group with you. So, quickly going through, we're all in this together. So because we're all in this together, when we're talking about ideas and suggestions, we talk as a whole. So we use the language of we, the collective language, not you. You have choice, and choices have consequences, and consequences can go in any direction. We lead with curiosity, kindness, patience, compassion, and gentleness. And we listen for understanding both to others and to ourselves. Um, we speak from the heart, what's true for you, and I will add what's true for you right now. And we try to use the lens of both and, also and, to acknowledge that there are always multiple influences on anything. Um, Try to have fun. And this is going to be posted to YouTube. So if there are any concerns about it being recorded, please let us know. And at some point soon, I think we will have actually instructions on options that you have if you have concerns. So that's still under construction. So I will do a quick round to invite any additions, any questions, or any concerns. So I think the first in the circle is Ben.
No questions, no concerns, and I believe our privacy statement is drafted and available. So, yeah, Ronnie on the spot. So over to you, April.
I have no questions and no concerns, but again, I'm brought to the realization that having fun, being light about this process, always finding the humor, keeping it simple. I tend to complexify stuff. So reminding myself as much as anyone to keep it simple and keep it moving. And I agree with what's there. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Roland. Would you like me to go over the primary functions of the guild?
Yes, I'm going to go greet Becca. So if you could.
That's important. So this guild is actually part of the heartbeat of the Lifeboat Academy. It is central and core, I think, fundamental to everything that we do. And what it involves is creating opportunities for all of us to develop deeper relationships with ourselves, with each other, and with all the relations on the planet, here and beyond. The main responsibilities are around preserving and demonstrating doing that. So building and deepening internal relationships, bringing the joy in, identifying the joy when it happens, and bearing in mind that we should celebrate our successes, our efforts, and to be convivial with each other and anyone else that we run into. This guild also looks at experimental spirituality. So things may change as things emerge. And I would like to welcome our partner in this endeavor, the Lifeboat Academy, from afar, Becca. Welcome.
Yay!
Hi.
Hello.
I was going to tell Becca, you could go join Ben in the library, and then I realized Becca has never been here. She said, be aware the library is, and it's totally not obvious.
Yeah.
She was lucky to find Pender Island, let alone the library.
We are on the map, you know.
Welcome. And we're just going through the responsibilities and sort of the preamble around the Heartwork Guild, of which Roland and I are co-caretakers. This guild is concerned with our reconnection with the land and with all our relations as re-indigenation for all of us. It often involves also personal healing and grief work. And we bear witness to what's happening in other meetings and activities in the Lifeboat Academy using the Heartwork as a lens. So we watch so-called vibes and the emotional aspects of the guild work. We keep the circle process as central to this guild and the agreements, and that's why we repeat them. The agreements really are the philosophy part of how we work together. And we also try to make sense of the experience and discernment that we might have and helping to develop that capacity. And we find that using this process and with these responsibilities that we do surface what needs to be surfaced in our interactions, in our circles, in our connective abilities. And that brings us now to the actual objective work, I guess you'd say, of this session. And I'll just mention that we carry over activities and actions from each meeting and make sure that we don't lose anything, I guess, in between. Try not to let things fall through the cracks, or try to make the cracks really, really small at least. And so the action items from our last meeting were to take the idea of having Sociocracy 201 educational session back to the coordination circle. And of course, the coordination circle has representatives from all the guilds who bring anything that needs to be coordinated across our sort of whole organism, and make sure that we're aware of that and that we're coming to grips with those things. So that's one action item. And the second one is to outline the process for the agreement circle, which is a new circle that we are, I believe, unveiling this week. Tomorrow. So do we want to have discussion about the action items first, or do we want to set priorities for our agenda?
I think agenda items.
So
if we need to take any, if we need to discuss any of the action items, that can go on the agenda.
okay. So do we want to put either of those onto the agenda?
I think that probably just doing an like with the Connect the Dots Club, doing an update, because since the Sociocracy 201 idea was going back to the coordination circle, so an update on that, even though we were all there, and maybe even just an update on the agreement circle.
Great.
Is what I would suggest.
Great. And do we have anything else to add to the agenda?
It just occurred to me, we had talked about last time, we talked about how the definition for the Heartwork Guild had morphed as we used it, as we were meeting. And in going over the main responsibilities, I felt like it wasn't that discussion wasn't really reflected in the main responsibilities. So I wanted to put that on the agenda to chit chat about. I also wanted to know, I don't where the link to the privacy statement is. I'd like to add that to the when the YouTube video goes up. I would like to add that, and I may have just not. I may have missed the email where that was announced, or
It was in Asana, so
it was in. Okay.
yeah. I'll just put that as an action item. We don't need to discuss it. That just
Cool.
seems like an action item.
Okay.
Is there anything else to add to the agenda?
I would propose that we start with the Heartwork definition and responsibilities, sort of start big picture, and or the updates, because I think the updates can be pretty quick. But and also a reminder that establishing the badges is like an old thing that's been on the agenda for a while, and I don't even know if how.
It just takes one of us to want to prioritize it.
Yeah, which
That's
hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet.
Okay, well, I agree.
The badges idea is they're meant to be little rewards. It's actually figuring out like the different parts that you need to be a peer in the Heartwork Guild. And so as you approach or as you achieve or whatever, actually probably the best way to describe it is getting people used to opening the chickens. If you're able to go, if you learn,
chickens die within 6 months.
No, not exactly like that. It's sort of a stepped process. You know, you go, you shadow, you are shadowed, and then and then you're whatever evaluated, or I forget the language that we use. And then if you do all of that and the chickens survive, then you get the chicken badge. And then that means
And the badges are linked to the skills necessary to keep the guild going.
yeah.
So basically, what are the skills necessary to keep the Heartwork Guild operating and functioning properly? And who has those skills, and how do you know?
We just have to figure out the sash like the scouts have, where you could stick the badges on.
Mhm.
So
Yes, we've
task
talked.
is to do the artwork. Is that the task?
It's actually just talking through the
Oh,
process. I
okay.
think in part it's doing the artwork, but part of it is just like
Yes, we've been invited to give some artwork, some visual depictions of what the badges might be. I haven't responded to that invitation yet. I don't know if others have, but
Nobody
that
did.
might be kind of a fun activity if we had more time on a rainy afternoon like this one. That might be a fun thing to do at some point.
oh, there you go, a workshop. Badge drawing workshop.
Okay. So it looks like as if our priorities have emerged. Should we simply then jump in?
Yeah.
And I would like to say, Becca, if at any point you have questions or curiosity about what the heck this is, or what we're talking about, or why we're using this process, then feel free to ask that.
Thank you.
All right. Can we scroll down again to the priorities? Okay. Should we simply go around the circle and find out what the definition is according to each of us?
Well, Roland, it was your suggestion. I'm wondering, can you give us some context?
Sure. Could you scroll back up again? So the primary functions, I think we altered last time. And I feel like what we didn't work on was the main responsibilities. And because one of the things that we talked about in terms of how things have morphed is that most of the ideas for the what do you call it? Not the schedule for the offerings, for the fall offerings, were from the Heartwork Guild, that then passed it on to the Outreach Guild, and then since then we've talked about, well, because the facilitators were in the Outreach Guild, and then we sort of, anyway, all of that has slightly shifted around. So in the main responsibilities, it feels like maybe clarifying that, what does build? I think that it probably falls in building and deepening internal relationships, but it's more than that. Now it is not just internal relationships, but it's also offerings on what is the word I'm looking for the fall agenda? Fall
Semester.
the fall semester. So that's what I feel is missing now, is that sort of additional element. Now I'm feeling really awkward, so I can't think of my words even more. So I'm going to pass to Ben.
Okay. I copied, because the other thing that this links to is we've updated our guild interest form. And so that was part of what we talked about at our coordination circle on Monday. And then based on that conversation, I did a little tweaking, and in the chat, I copied the most recent form for the Heartwork and philosophy, which is relationality, values, reaching in, experimental spirituality, facilitation, working out the philosophy, grief work, conviviality, and personal healing. And I was also doing that at the same time, Roland, you were talking, so I'm not sure if I'm following, but I don't think that the fall semester changes our responsibilities at all. Because there's still, I think the main responsibility is deepening relationships, conviviality, personal healing, grief work. I think it's just those are now expressed as events in the small fall
Yeah.
semester.
Yeah.
So the only thing that really changed, I think, is that we moved facilitation from, it had been in governance, and then facilitation moved into Heartwork. So I feel like, so I'm not sure that the fall semester really makes much difference on the main responsibilities, but I don't know if and that facilitation thing is such a weird, because everyone's facilitating in some ways, and so it's one of those, does it actually live in one guild, or is it distributed to many guilds? And anyhow, those are my thoughts to start. So over to you, April.
Well, my feeling is that we need to have something about facilitation. What we facilitate is what is emerging as important from our Heartwork, our guild work. And actually it's moving into education too. So it's facilitation and education. And sometimes those things will be picked up then for the vehicle that we use to be able to express that stuff outside of the guild is the fall semester and offerings that come up periodically, but regularly, I think. So I don't know, I would add something about facilitation / education there, just to make sure that's included, because it's how do people find out about how we do our stuff unless we do that, is where that's sort of landing for me. Was that the question?
You're facilitating, so it's the question is whatever question you want to pose.
This
Are
is your answer.
We're talking about the definition now, right? And so these are the things that are part of the definition, which is slightly different than the main responsibilities. But it's the overall, it reflects our vision and mission, I guess, as much as anything. Anybody have anything else then to add to?
Well, are we going to keep with the circle?
Yeah.
Then it would be over to Becca.
Okay.
And you can always pass, but you're also free to contribute.
I feel like I'm just catching up and haven't been on this guild. I mean, I've been on want to be informed, but I haven't been very keeping track. So it's lovely to be hearing about it, and I'm confused about what Roland's confusion was and whether it's been addressed or not.
My turn.
I think so.
Okay. So what it wasn't specifically about the fall semester, but it was more acknowledging that, or in the main responsibilities, acknowledging that the ideas for what has gone into a lot of the fall semester has come from Heartwork. So this is where, because it's Heartwork and philosophy, so it is where the ideas for what the Lifeboat Academy is coming from. But it occurs to me also that starts to change now that we have the research and learning guild, that sort of starts to change. That might change again. But I'm looking at the primary functions, and it says develop deeper relationships with themselves, each other, and all our relations here and beyond. As opposed to building and deepening internal relationships, which is the main responsibilities. But yeah, I think I can let go of all of this. I feel like I'm not connecting with anyone around it, so I'm okay with just leaving it be. So over to Ben.
I would encourage us to stick with the conversation, even if it doesn't feel like there's connecting, because that's kind of the whole point of the circle, is to figure out where there is the connection. And I'm thinking one of the interesting things about letting things evolve over time is to let go of things that no longer serve, kind of, bring things up to date. And from a sociocracy perspective, the main responsibilities are actually tied to the badges. The main responsibilities are really supposed to be, what are your chores? So not, the primary function, the North Star, we're about heart, we're about connection, la, 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 la. But the main responsibilities are, runs the agreement circle, responsible for connect the dots, pays the bills, right? It's like, it's supposed to be sort of more granular around what are, our actual responsibilities that we need to keep going. So I think that's actually, and this was written, almost a year ago, when we didn't have as clear a sense of what the guilds were going to be working on and doing. So I think it's actually worth the time to kind of clarify what the responsibility should be for the Heartwork Guild beyond talking about big ideas, and including, I think, maybe we let go of philosophy, as because we've started to talk about, it's really the agreements, right? Because we started to make the connection that our agreements are based on our best experience. What do we need? What are the values? What are the rules for how we want to work together? So I was just thinking the other day, the agreements are our dharma, right? There are written down, this is how we are with each other. And philosophy, love of wisdom, it is the wisdom of how do we want to be together. So philosophy makes sense, except I think philosophy makes it sound too much like we're sitting around, navel gazing, as opposed to we really are the keepers of the agreements. So it's Heartwork and agreements. And if all of a sudden we think of ourselves as the keepers of the agreements, then that starts to give some concreteness to it, maybe. Anyhow, those are my thoughts for this time around. Over to you, April.
I like bringing in sort of, so what is the practical application then? And I think agreements are fundamental to this. I'm thinking, though, that we still need to be philosophy, because for me, that means thinking about stuff in a wider sense. And then out of that, getting the practical bit, which in this case is agreements. So it just seems to me that philosophy and agreements are two different levels of stuff. And I also go back to what Roland said about that what's come out as public offerings is grew out of all of this, grew out of the definition and our way of being. And that's really important. If we only keep that internally, that builds our resilience, but it doesn't build outside resilience, right? So we're kind of figuring out with this guild, how do we pass on the resilience that we think comes out of working in this way. And I haven't thought further than that. So over now to Becca. Have we confused you even more, Becca?
No, it's that resonated for me, what you said about resilience, and it just feels complicated because there's so many levels of intrapersonal, interpersonal, organizational, and then the wider community network potential. And it seems to me might be good to name levels and be aware of when we're doing which, when we feel a need to do which, and that maybe what you're saying, what I thought I heard you saying, Roland, was that the function of suggesting programming to the wider community wasn't initially reflected here. Over to you.
Yeah. So thanks, Ben, for suggesting that we continue talking about this. I like the Heartwork and Agreements Guild as a title. If I understand what you were saying was that the word philosophy has already a kind of baggage attached to it, and that by renaming it Heartwork and Agreements, that makes it more concrete what the guild is about. Philosophy may be too vague. So I like that idea. And I also wonder if is this something that we're going to also have to explain for people to understand? And is that important? You know, Heartwork and Agreements we understand, but then going outwards, you know, will people get it? And would a word like philosophy, another word that has the same general idea? So I like the Heartwork and Agreements, and I have some questions or concerns about the name. And I think I'm wondering if it is, uh, uh, you know, sometimes I will snag on one little thing and it colors the whole thing, and it takes me a little while to figure out what that one little thing is. And I think right now my best guess is that the little thing that I'm snagging on is building and deepening internal relationships. And the internal part is maybe where I got stuck. Because in having offerings that come from the Heartwork Guild, or offerings ideas that come from the Heartwork Guild outwards, you know, not just for the people who are already part of the Lifeboat Academy, but also for beyond, then it is is there slightly different wording that would be able to convey to outward reaching, this is what we teach, this is how we work, and this is what you can be part of. So I will leave it there. I will refrain from trying to backtrack and just leave it in the circle to discuss. So over to Ben.
Well, and I think that's what I was trying to get at in terms of, you know, we are not the only guild. And I actually take exception at the idea that all of the offerings have come from Heartwork, which is not true and shouldn't continue to be true. And we have an outreach and network guild specifically that is the dissemination beyond people who are already involved. So like what Becca was talking about, resilience, we've identified from the early on that reason why we have these different guilds was we recognized that there are these different aspects. So every guild is thinking big picture. So, you know, finance and legal is thinking really big picture about how do we work within a capitalist system and make enough space where we don't have economic pressures, you know, influencing what we're doing. It's very big picture. There's a lot of philosophy stuff in that, you know, and practical stuff. Likewise, outreach is also thinking about how do you engage people when these ideas are really different. And, and we're talking, and how do, is there a process, by which you bring people along? So everyone's thinking big ideas. And I think that what you said you're snagging on, Roland, I think actually is the nub. Like, Heartwork is really about, once people are in the tent, how do we continue to build the relationships and live out the values? And I think that that's one of the key differences is, we're talking about deepening, walking the talk around living the agreements. So it isn't just presenting the agreement. I mean, this is my take on it, is we're not just presenting, these are the agreements we work by. It's actually, how does that work? And, how do you live that out? So it's also where I get a little hooked on the education part, because now we have research and learning. I mean, this is a newly emerging guild that's supposed to be about research, big picture thinking. What are some of the things that are working? How do we identify them? And then how do we disseminate it? So, and I think, it's probably, that's the thing, is how do we function without clearly defined, this is artwork, that is outreach, like that siloing. So how do we establish, and maybe that's the thing, maybe it's thinking like a Venn diagram, and facilitation is actually on the edge between Heartwork and outreach. It's not really in any one, maybe we can be clear about that, sort of like shared responsibilities with outreach includes facilitation. Education includes a shared responsibility with research and learning. And then it becomes an interesting conversation about where's the handoff? When does it become sort of one or the other, or is it always both? Anyhow, I feel like this is a really cool and productive conversation, even though it wasn't what we sort of thought, it wasn't what I thought we were going to be talking about today, but it sounds really cool. So over to you, April.
Well, I think maybe that we need another slot now under main responsibilities that says shared responsibilities. And it says exactly what you have said, Ben. And that has taken some time to take roost in terms of, it's something that becoming more evident as we work through this over time and define and iterate and reiterate. And that's the way it should be. And this is the way it can work the best, I think. And do we actually want to put beside facilitation and education under shared responsibility what the guilds are that we're sharing the responsibility with, or with which guilds we are sharing responsibility? Great. I think this is useful in adapting what we've been doing, for sure. I have nothing more to say about that. Should we check around the circle if there's anything else to add to that, and then move into the next item? Okay.
I think keep
So
going.
passing on to Becca, anything to add to that?
It seemed like there was a question still that was raised about whether to rename the guild or not, and Heartwork in Philosophy, or Heartwork in Agreements, or Heartwork Agreements in Philosophy. And my mind keeps thinking, well, you got to pick the one that has the best acronym.
Like, what is that?
Well, Heartwork Agreements in Philosophy is HAP, which is kind of like happy. So but Heartwork in Agreements Guild is HAG, which, depending on your attitude towards aging women and witches, might be a positive thing, but it has negative connotations in the wider world. So I don't know.
I go to my mind goes right to the threefold goddess. So for me,
but I did hear differing perspectives on whether to let go of the word philosophy or not. So just a name that we might want to have that on the agenda for future if we're not resolving it today.
Well,
Over to you.
we could just call it the Heartwork Guild, and then the acronym would be HUG, which is close to hug. So,
I like
that could be a good thing. And actually, I generally just call it the Heartwork Guild. I
Mhm.
rarely call it the Heartwork and da 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 da
Mhm.
Guild. So we could just call it the Heartwork Guild, which is what I've been calling it. Ergo, we've been calling it, of course. I like the idea of the shared responsibilities. It feels like something to share the idea with other guilds, that to identify where are the things that overlap, and are there things that always overlap with the same guilds kind of thing. I feel like that seems to remind me of something from a long time ago, and maybe something that we've been not focusing it so much on recently. Oh, there he goes. You see what you've done.
Keep
So,
talking, keep going.
uh, yeah. I am curious to see if there are places that are just always shared between the guilds. Like Ben, you were pointing out that facilitation is going to be, in one way or another, is part of every guild all the time anyway. So yeah. So back to you, Ben.
Um, well, and in terms of the main the shared responsibilities, I think this last one also, it feels to me like it's the overlap between agreements and the research and learning guild. Because there's sort of different levels of discernment, and there's sort of like going into personal experience, but then there's also kind of comparing across experiences. So I think I would put that um, in there as well, with shared with research. Um, and I think that the facilitation, it might be helpful just to kind of clarify, yes, every guild will be responsible for some facilitation, but there's a skill set that is not necessary. Like, we're not going to require people in the legal and finance and legal guild to also be facilitators. It kind of goes against type, right? Whereas outreach, talking to new folks, figuring out how to welcome, kind of the art of hosting, there's a set of facilitation skills in outreach, and there's definitely a set of facilitation skills in Heartwork. Research, maybe not so much. There's sort of a set of process skills in research, but isn't necessarily tied to facilitation. So I think I think for now it seems useful to me to kind of say these things seem to be on the edge, and it kind of gives us a little bit of a sharper lens about, when we say facilitation, what do we really mean? As opposed to when we say process, right? Because I think the research is still about holding the process. Sociocracy says, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three, versus, this is how to make people feel good while they're doing it, and how to use that. Anyhow, those are my last thoughts. And if people are okay, I would just move that last bullet point under shared responsibilities. And I think this has been really useful, and I feel like we could move on. So over to you, April.
Yeah, I agree. I am aware that we haven't said where we're going to put agreements, if we're going to use that word. But we can come back to that. I think we collectively understand the importance of agreements to our processes and to this particular guild. So that's good. One last question. Anything else to add on to Becca?
Nothing for me.
I'm good to keep going.
Okay.
Next to Ben.
That works for me. Yep.
Thank you. So, looks to me like updates are the next agenda items. And who would like to speak to the updates?
I can I can do. Well, I would like to do an update on Connect the Dots Club because I just thought it was really fantastic, and I I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation, and I was really energized. I had a low day Tuesday before the meeting. Was it just one of those days where the stars were not aligning, and that meeting left me feeling so energized and motivated. And I'm really excited about what seems to be emerging in terms of, actually, I would say, an underlying philosophy around how we want to do learning, which is that it's peer-to-peer, relational. It's not about memorizing facts. It's really about developing the human library. Um, and not just the human library, but also that kind of the experimental. It's a place where we can talk about what doesn't work just as much as we can talk about what does work. And I found that really exciting. So that would be my update. Over to you, April and/or Roland.
Well, my feeling about that is that, yeah, it's a really good, well, it was really good. The last two sessions are a really good example of how the process works, for one thing, and also how to use assets, whether they're people assets or resource material aspects of a number of different kinds, and with the really strong proviso that the human stuff and the relational stuff is incredibly important to the process and to the resourcing, really. That was pretty clear from the last session that we had. There was a very nice sense of collectiveness about both the sessions, and a definite feeling of one person building on another person building on another, which is always very fun for me to have that sense. And yeah, I think we were redefining learning and all that fits there, and yeah, and making space for lots of stuff. Let me pass on to, well, Becca wasn't at the sessions.
I do have a question, which if you could just give me a very brief rundown of like how many people were there and what you did. I did look at the Miro board after the first one.
There were 7 people total at the first one and 5 people at the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And
the first was brainstorming and a lot of board work. And the second one was mostly circle talk. So we went through gathering considerations about how can we make this useful. And sort of it kept going until we came to some takeaways.
I would say the labeling the clusters of stuff actually seemed to go, it happened very quickly in the first session, and then we kind of enlarged on that, but kept to the same categories for the second session. I thought there might be changing around, but no, it seemed like that was quite a stable thing. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the way that Ben used color and shape in the visual depiction of that. It made it very invitational, I think. Back to Becca and/or Roland then. Update?
Yes, cool. Also, I thought it was, the circle brought out the importance of go slow to go fast. You know, the I want to know where my water is going to be coming from, and then understanding, oh, actually, to make sure that I know where my water comes from also means having building relationships and having good working styles or relationships or whatever. that's just as important as having actually the material water available to you. That it's how, anyway, I thought that was really interesting. Being able to show the intersection of the different parts, which is the different parts of ultimately what the Lifeboat Academy is trying to demonstrate. Yeah, yep. So it actually was, I think April was saying it earlier that it was a good example of not just of the process, but also a good example of why the Lifeboat Academy is looking at all of these parts and trying to integrate all of these parts. So next to Ben.
Nothing to add. Oh, back to you, April.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should celebrate the fact that we tried something new, and in many respects, it's giving us emergence that we wouldn't get otherwise, and that it's a really nice way to do this kind of thing, so we can, in the end, get the product maybe of a curriculum or a set of steps of learning that takes us farther on. And I have to say, as a way of establishing a reading list or whatever for whatever courses might be part of this, it's the most funnest faculty meeting I've ever been at. And, thank you for that experience. So, should we turn now to updates on the idea of Sociocracy 201, which would be, to my understanding, the more in-depth and perhaps practical application of sociocracy for those that have worked with it a little bit or have the basic understanding and want to see where the rubber meets the road, how to put the wheels on this buggy.
The update's simple. There's no update. We didn't discuss it at the coordination circle, and I think it's also in some sense, I think it's a bit premature because in part it's what's half what's emerging through the Connect the Dots Club and half what might happen through the research project.
Yeah.
So at this point, I don't think there hasn't been anyone calling out for anything more specific. And what I heard at the Connect the Dots Club was central to this new model of learning, that it's about application. So I think that's where this stuff will come out. There's I think that was definitely like knowing enough about what's out there to figure out how it can help you frame your next experiment. And that creates its own sort of perpetual learning machine. So other than that, I don't think there's really an update on the Sociocracy 201 idea as such. Not that I'm aware of, anyhow. So over to you, April, unless if there's anything that you can add to that.
I can't add anything to that, and I think it's probably a good thing to let ride for now, in the same way that we've been dragging around the badge idea for some time, and it will come to fruition at some point. Becca and then Roland, anything to add to that for the update?
No.
I agree with letting it ride for now, and even if I heard what Ben was saying correctly, it is kind of waiting to see if there's a pull, waiting to see if there's a need. I think last time we were talking about it because it felt like it was maybe a dense presentation, and to give it more air. But if things seem to be working, then things are working. So let's just wait and let the organism metabolize and see what comes of it. So next to you, Ben.
Should I just jump on to the agreement circle? So we got our first session tomorrow. We only have one person signed up for it, which is Ruth at last time I checked.
Can
So
you tell me what I didn't see
oh,
the
right. The agreement circle. So in a way it's new and in a way it's old. So basically what we do on the farm every day is our agreement circle. And with a little bit of a on the farm, we do ITFL meditation and ITFL as part of it in Indigenous Tools for Living with kind of a guided visualization component. But the main focus is we talk about what do we need to be present and show up, and what do the agreements mean to us. And so what we wanted to do was to make that process available to a broader audience that isn't, on the farm. And the goals behind it are in part giving people a chance to experience proper circle process. So, just how it's different to sit in a circle versus in another kind of discussion forum. Also giving people tools, eventually developing, it's in that skill sharing, as in you shadow and then you start to lead. And then once you start to lead with support, you can bring it back to your own community and use this as a tool in your own local community. And at the same time, to give people an opportunity to explore more deeply what are the agreements, what do they mean to you, and how do they develop. So basically, it's a land acknowledgement, grounding, a quick check-in, a little bit of a frame, and then what we were going to do to start is to offer up an agreement that then it can be like one of the agreements we work with is the blind ones and the elephant. And, what's that mean to you? What lands, what doesn't? Where do you have resistance? And just let the circle sort of do its work. So that's kind of where we are now. And we decided we can keep it quite light because we're not expecting a huge crowd. It's a friendly audience and all that kind of stuff. So that would be my update there. And over to you, April. Anything to add?
No.
And
So
I look forward to having you be part of the morning circle so you get to experience it.
Me too.
That's it for me.
And just as an outsider, there's that, I don't know what that super popular thing is about the four agreements or the
Oh, right. Yeah.
just
the
to make sure
Rotary
to
agreements.
distinguish when talking about it publicly, distinguish it from that, because people might make assumptions that it has to do with that.
Yeah, and I don't think we didn't spend a lot of time on naming for this circle, so that's definitely something to put in the considerations. Cool.
And you don't have to be careful not to take away the A from the Happy Guild if you rename agreements to something else.
The agreements will always be the agreements, but they may not be the agreements circle. Anyhow, back to you,
Okay.
April.
What else is on our list?
Badges. So I think it's time to adjourn.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we all need to leave. So
Well, we
once again.
still have a little bit of time. Can we open that to just, because we haven't looked at it in so long, there's barely any May. Yeah, there's very little.
May 9th, 1946. It's that old.
We so rarely have extra time unless we want to just.
Well, and I think, it could be, so basically the badges are, what are the skills necessary in the guild. And some of them are the standard, you need a note taker and you need somebody to lead, facilitate the meetings. But what are the key skills that we demonstrate in the Heartwork Guild? It is an
Mhm.
interesting question. Shall we do a once around? I broached the question, so I pass over to April.
And the question was, what are the main skills that we need to be in the Heartwork Guild or guild to work?
Yeah.
One of the main skills is how do you describe stuff that's like emotional intelligence and a set of personal and interpersonal skills. How do you talk about those? It's the old challenge of how do you make the invisible visible, I think, and we do try to come to grips with that every once in a while and try to, like we just have in our description of the guild, try to figure out how to say what we know that exists there and is really, really critical, and is hard work, but it can appear to be really amorphous or overly personal, and then it's very hard to describe. I have all sorts of technical words to describe it because, like I read the book and did the course, but I don't think we're looking for technical words here. And now I'm passing on to Becca.
I mean, technical words might be a place to start, and then we could find other words for those same ideas. It seems like a good grounding in circle practice would be a basic thing. And yeah, it's so like, in addition to being challenging to name, it's challenging to judge, to evaluate, to put who by whose assessment, like, is there an EQ test, like an IQ test, or and would we even want such a thing if it existed? But you also don't want to end up with the, well, you know it when you see it, because that can get into very like, well, that person just rubs me the wrong way, so I don't want to be in the guild with them problem. But that makes me think of a specific skill, which is an ability to name if I'm triggered and act skillfully with, that's okay, that's not very well defined, act skillfully, but to not make a bigger mess.
Yeah.
Just step back or shift the energy to avoid triggering more people when triggered. I'm sure I could just keep talking and thinking of more things, but it's my first guild meeting, so I don't even know if I'm on the right track here. Over to you, Roland.
I'm reminded of the monks of Cool in Terry Pratchett, where they all wear the latest sunglasses and are always on the vanguard of everything cool. So I think maybe part of the Heartwork Guild is to be a monk of cool. And I think that more seriously, we could go back to the main responsibilities, which are also kind of a description of types of chores. One of the Heartwork is also tasked with gatherings and conviviality. So it's like, you know, the potluck. The potluck falls under the Heartwork Guild. So there's seems to be a plethora of possible badges just there, you know, how to host, how to organize and prepare for a gathering. So there's also a practical side to it. And then I really like the idea. I think that, you know, a term that we often use is uh, refining our art of living, and that I would see that as being part of the Heartwork. Um, so it's can I think learning the circle process is badgeable. Um, yeah, can you come up with three semi-original agreements? Then you become a master. There. So I think going back to the main responsibilities and looking at what they are, I think we might be able to identify a few places where people can get badges.
Hmm.
So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I think it's really good to remember the practical side of it. I still remember, actually, I think Becca, you know, I think it was when we were studying the Laird stuff of, you know, 90% of the facilitation is the practical stuff, you know, like good signposting and clear expectations. And, you know, there's this desire to kind of leap into the like deep end. And so, you know, keeping it practical can be really important.
I think we have our abyss of cool.
What's it say? What's the hat say?
I don't know.
That says Silk Road, Yo-Yo
Mm.
Ma. Just to show I'm a cultured monk of cool
Mhm.
as well. Of course, I can't see you through my sunglasses now, but
Oh, minor details. So, and I think the art of living, yeah, how do you, I really like the being triggered. I'm thinking actually about there are some skills like internal family systems,
yeah.
Focusing, um, well, and that's the other thing. Yeah, it's focusing and internal family systems, which I think is part of that. How do you know when you're triggered and how can you act skillfully with it? But there's also the thing that might be harder in our interactions with folks. One of the hardest skills is to realize when you're telling yourself stories and to not take your story seriously. And yeah, I think that's a really challenging one. And, you know, and it's all a useful lie. It can be helpful, but it's not true. Or it's no more true. The opposite is also true at the same time. And there was one sort of, what was the other one? Oh, actually, I don't know where this fits. I don't know if this is a badge, but I'm going to say the anti-agreements. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. Because I think that's one of the things that can help is like gaslighting is not good. Bright siding is not good, is not helpful. And there are some of those behaviors that are, they're easier to identify than the alternative, but by kind of establishing that outer boundary, you kind of define what's closer to the center. So yeah, I think that also might be a way of, you know, getting your badge in, being able to identify, you know, love bombing and all those kinds of things. Over to you, April.
I think there's all sorts of human relational and relationality kind of practices that come in here. Certainly something I would call fruitful detachment, which I think is next door to the idea you've just talked about. In
You call
terms
it
of
fruitful detachment?
Yeah, I just made that up. But it's
like it.
Next door to don't believe your own story kind of thing. There is a way of being observant and detached from what's going on without being unempathic or compassionate. It's a part of being compassionate. And I think deep listening compassion is another piece. And I could go on, but I won't. Passing over to my colleagues in the box below me on my screen. So Becca and Roland.
Hard to assess, but presence, I think, is something that underlies a lot of these. Like when you were talking about the skills of doing a potluck, I was thinking about how to do it in a way where you're not so focused on the logistics that you don't warmly greet the guests when they arrive, which has been a challenge for me in my life. And I also want to name, and this sort of gets into outside of this particular topic, but was triggered by something that Ben said, and is relates to the personal grieving work, that Laird is dying.
Oh.
I just got the notice, a Caring Bridge notice from him, that I just read on the ferry on the way here, and in it, I also learned that his son died at 43 a month and a half ago, and who's somebody that I knew very well when he was sick, between ages of 6 and 9. And so I'm feeling a lot of grief and also a lot of gratitude for him as a facilitation mentor and teacher and companion. And so just wanted to name, in the spirit of naming our emotions as they're coming up. Thanks. Over to you.
Well, I was thinking, actually, there's a lot of this stuff that is, how do you award a badge? and I think I have an idea for it. I think it is, and I don't know the specifics yet, but it is, a lot of this stuff is, some of it is internal, but as we often say, internal is where it starts and then it spills outwards. But it could be that the badges are awarded by just peers. I have noticed that, I have noticed that you celebrate when you notice that you do this thing, and you've done it several times. So I would like to award you with the noticing badge, or so that it's less about being shadowed. I'm going to shadow you. Okay, notice. But more about, and it's also, it's kind of an interesting thing too, because it becomes this reciprocal thing where the person who is noticing you doing the thing is also showing that you're being seen for what you do, and so it becomes reciprocal and becomes relational. So I'm not entirely sure how formal it needs to be or how it would be set up, but yeah, it seems this is all sort of things that happen in practice, in just living and learning to integrate things. A lot of this stuff is stuff that we're talking about are things that we try to integrate in just the way we are. So yeah. Over to you, Ben.
Well, and that makes me think of, we also have talked about badges are on a scale, right? You've got novice, intermediate, and masterful badges, right? That, some of these are, focusing as here's how you focus. You take a situation, okay, let's give, where do you feel it? How does that present? What do you call that? Does that resonate? That stepwise process is learnable and doable and, kind of on command. But like noticing when you're triggered and treating it skillfully, it's like, unless we go around intentionally, like, I know what really set April off. I'm going to help April win a badge. Poke, poke, poke.
Big one.
Let's see what happens when I push this red button. So anyhow, I think that makes, and I love that idea of, because it's also the shadowing part of it is calling it out when you do it. Like actually being, I'm feeling triggered right now. Like for the people who feel like they have those skills. Okay, I'm feeling a little triggered, I gotta say. So just give me a moment here. And then you can be able to say, okay, so this is what's going on with me. And so people who are there are shadowing it as it's happening, by living it out. And it made me think of, I was just in a meeting where we were talking about Indigenous practices, and one person was saying in one of their first practicums, their job was, it was an Indigenous facing organization, and their job was to sit in the lobby for 2 hours every morning and have coffee. And they were talking about how, at first it was like, why? I'm here to learn. Why are you doing this? Like, don't you have anything for me to do? But eventually, like that, just being there without a schedule, without an agenda, and the relationships that, it was like you had to create the space to figure out why that was a really valuable thing to do. So I think that's also part of, the Lifeboat Academy, is some of this stuff can't be scheduled. It just, hopefully you're there when it happens. And after you're there a couple times when it happens, then you can, and once it happens, you can debrief it, anyhow, I think that's a really cool idea. I love it. It was a very long-winded way of saying, I think that's a great idea, Roland. I love it. So anyhow, over to you, April.
Yes, thank you. I do too. And I'm also aware that we are coming to time, and I actually have another appointment, so I have to buzz off quite quickly. Any last words on this, and then any last word to or takeaway? So can we just go around and see any last words on badges, and then what's your last word for the good of the cause just before we leave? Over to Becca.
I love this conversation, especially this last part, and it seems like it could be as it happens, but it also could be part of like an appreciative feedback round. Hey, did anyone notice any points towards badges that were earned in today's meeting or today's whatever?
Yeah.
As a practice, as a way of bringing Heartwork practice into other sessions, and it makes me want to move here.
Yay! That's not purpose at all.
But I can say that now that I'm here rather than like over Zoom.
Well, and that makes me think of the difference between calling in and calling out. So I like that. And I was also thinking, because it could just be things that you're noticing during the day, or, at some point we could have like a badge bag where there's like little mini badges that, and then when you get 5 compassion badges from somebody who's noticed that you were compassionate, then you get the big badge. You get the official badge. Anyone could go into the badge bag and sort of like pick out one of the mini badges and give it. I noticed. Oh, and then we could start a badge currency.
We're not getting April to her next meeting.
Is it over to
Okay,
me?
yes, I'm done.
Well, you always consider the downside though, because there's going to be the keeners out there that are going to run around being aggressively compassionate at people, you know? Like, I need my badge. Pinch them really hard so they
That
start
was
crying. Oh,
compassionate,
there,
isn't it, Bob?
That was pretty enlightened of me, wasn't it? Yeah, over to you, April.
I think it should be cookies instead of mini badges.
Mm.
Once you get 5 cookies, then you can bid on the big badge.
Do you have to keep them whole, or can you actually consume them but say I had them?
Yes.
Believe you. Last words. Becca.
I included my last words in the
Yeah,
last round.
I think I'm good. Over to you,
Yeah.
Ben.
Yeah, me too. This has been really fun. Over to you,
Great.
April.
I wish I was there physically with all of you, and I wish that we had figured out how to get Becca to my house on the way to however it is that you got here to start with. Next time we'll do that.
Mm.
So I think this is the end of the Heartwork and Agreement/Philosophy Guild meeting for this time period. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, for being
Good job,
present
April.
in such a way, and we will carry on.
Bye, everybody.
This will be mounted to YouTube very soon.